All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Low Code Campfire for Friday, September 3, 17th edition. A lot of you have been here for several of those. Today, I'm using Open Line Friday as the discussion, which is to say I didn't prepare any topics. So that might make it for a short meeting. We might talk about what it is that we're doing for Labor Day for those of us in the United States. It is a community gathering. It's just to get together to talk about low code techniques, challenges, experiences. I hope somebody brought something to show. We have past episodes are recorded and they're on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/PlantAnApp, but you can also use that QR code. For anybody who's new, we get together once a week. Anyone who's new and wants to say hi, we encourage you to do that. That's coming up here in just a second, so come off mute and say hi. But it's just whatever it is that you want to talk about, and it's a pretty informal session. The main guideline is that if you got noise going on behind you, please be mute. It's been a very courteous group week by week. If you have questions or topics that you'd like to submit in advance and get on the agenda, do that. Sometimes I have the time to do a little bit of research. So if you submit them in advance, then sometimes I'll have an answer or at least a starting spot. And that same link is in the email that you get from us to do the introduction. So to sign up for the recording. So anybody new to the group and want to say hi? Anybody old to the group and want to say hi?
Is that old to the group as in been here a while and coming to the group, or just old in general?
I choose not.
That's what I was thinking.
I was the old general guy.
We got some veterans in this group, huh? Code veterans. Yeah.
Veterans, is that a code word for old?
Yes, it is.
Seasoned.
It's a dog
seasoned,
whistle.
yeah. Well seasoned.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. We are continuing our campaign for Capterra reviews. The last I looked, there were 7. There might be a few more. It's been a week since I've looked. But it's a way to get $20. That's the main reason you should do it, not to provide your honest opinion about our product. And so, first call, what's on your mind? What's going on this week? Nobody have a challenge to address?
Uh-oh, Dale's gonna start singing.
Well, I skipped that slide. I can go back to
it. Well, I had, I doubt we'll be able to address here, but I'll throw it out there anyway. I had submitted a survey response on the low code questionnaire to hopefully talk about at some point importing users into the system. You've got the user management capability, which is great. It's a one-off. In some of the things I'm doing, I'm dealing with a fair amount of users that I've got that I need to potentially bring in kind of on the fly from different clients using the app. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's something that's done and dusted, or whether that's a challenge, or kind of where that stands.
So I saw that one come in, and thanks for submitting in advance. I didn't have time to prepare, but I think in general it should be pretty straightforward to do. We have the Excel import capability. Have you used that before?
Yeah.
So when you import from an Excel, that gives you an entity that you can then iterate over. And so if you were, for example, are you PlantAnApp or Data and Sharp, Matthew, at this point?
PlantAnApp.
Okay, so you could build a workflow that has as its actions, as an input, all the fields that you want to extract from your Excel that are, username, password, first name, last name, whatever it is that you want to do. And then so then your workflow would be to use those actions to create a user, to create one user. So now you've got a workflow that has the ability to create a user, return back a user ID perhaps. And then you could iterate using execute actions for entity. You could iterate your entity. So your import would be something like import the thing, iterate the entity list, and each time through each iteration, call your workflow to create a user. Does that make sense? And we can call up any part of that. We could probably work our way through it if there's nobody else has anything to talk about.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I was actually thinking along those lines. I threw it out there because I've not had time to get to it yet. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting. Something that perhaps other people might run into as well. But
sure. Well, so let's, just for fun, let's bring up our test instance. In a previous low-code Campfire, we did talk about creating users, and that wasn't too hard to do. But let's just for fun do it as a workflow. So it should be something like, we'll create a namespace. And select it, and then this will be so just keeping it simple, username, grab more if we needed to, but that ought to do it. Right? So let's we'll make all something like that. So then the process would be, and well, we can go right to outputs here. We'll try and remember to output a user ID. So the process would be something like user management, user.
it was up above, I thought. Keep going. Create new user.
Yeah, this is, I'm not sure if we want to use that one or not. Let's see what we got. Sure. All right, let's do it. And then we'll just link to the end there. So I'm lazy. I'm going to grab all these so I don't miss any. So the username we want to create is, let's see, the display name, we can make it be first name, last name, email.
Since that has password in the list there, should we assume that we're creating a DNN user here as opposed to a planted app user?
Yeah, see, this is a Plantain app user. Yep, and since it doesn't have password, right? So, and this let's set this one. Let's use this one. But let me set it aside. This is going to be that. And then let's see if there's another one that we might want to use better. So in user management, might be this one. Yeah. So this would be an expression. So I'm going to try both of these before we get done, but I'm building it both ways. Isn't it exciting to do live coding? You never know what you're going to get.
I'm surprised you're brave enough to do this, Dale.
So 9 times out of 10, it works out. So we're going to go ahead and hit authorize. Anybody see anything, any mistakes?
I do have a question.
Yep.
And that is, you mentioned a plant and app user versus a DNN user.
Mm-hmm.
Enlighten me, if you would. What's the difference?
Well, it's similar, but it should end up. Here's what I would hope. The DNN. This is a user table action, and I would hope that as a result of it, it would create a DNN user. But notice that we don't have place for password. It's very similar to if you go. So I would expect that what would happen is it would fire off an email that would say, you know, you need to change your password. So it set them up, but not do it. So it's a
Like an unauthorized user almost,
or an authorized user, but they would have the password would have to be established by their email. I don't know absolutely what it will do. So I'm going to turn this one off, just say false on this one. We'll start with this one because I think it will work. Unfortunately, there is no, I don't think there's an output to this one. But I think it ends up generating a user ID. So I think you get your context ends up being user ID. So let's output user ID, and just for clarity, so do username, because if it comes back, I don't know what my user ID is from the system. So here we go. Save and test. Create
Cross your fingers.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to do one of my standards here. So user ID 33 and then username was changed. So I'm expecting that this is going to have done what we hoped. So if we were to go to users, and
there you go.
We have a user, and let's take a look here. If we do a incognito, what did I say? This at test.com?
Yes.
So it's that. Expected that. Let's see. So that's interesting that it didn't. Let's see what we got. So not
I
deleted.
think what you have there, Dale, is a plant an app login screen. So if you don't have the planted app user, I don't think you'll validate.
Oh, you didn't assign it the user role?
Right.
Okay. So if
Well,
you,
it's
yeah,
saying invalid username or password. So I'm going to just make sure I didn't mess up the password here. So, so we'll give it this password, force it, apply it. Oh, didn't like it for security reasons. That's interesting. So, all right, so we successfully changed it. Now let's try it. Well, that's interesting.
does it have to have the user role in order to log into Plan an App?
Let's find out if that's the problem. So I'm gonna register. I did get the user's role.
Okay, all right.
I think that role is what's holding us back here. Right. So interesting. It created it, didn't do what we'd hoped. I am going to go ahead and delete that and try again and see if we can catch what it's doing. So here we go. All right, so let's stare at it a little bit. Username, password, email, first name, last name, authorize. All right, that looks right. Might the user, oh, okay. I know what happened before. This other login, it's asking email, but it's actually username. So I'm going to say test1 at .com and reuse that as the email address. So our user is test1 at test.com and password that thing. So we run, it did it. We come back here, do some
You could just probably
pasting.
undelete the other one just to test to see if that was it.
Good point. So we have test1 at test.com. That and
Bingo.
bingo. Just don't have any rights. It's fine.
Cool.
So let's go with that other. Let's test that. It'll take but a second. Let's see if we can get logged out here. So users deleted.
All the way to the right.
Triple dot.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Restore. And so the username is that. And
No, that's the other one. That's the
Oh.
old, that's the second one you created.
thank you.
It's right underneath.
So the username is that, and I've changed the password. Hopefully I remember.
But don't you have to, isn't it, now don't you have to try to change the email, username to the email address?
No, I'm gonna leave it just as it is. And
Okay.
if we go to our login screen, it's prompting for email, but what it's really needing, our Plimpton app presumes it's an email address. So
I see, okay,
it's prompting email, but it really should be saying
okay.
username. And when you're so let's close the loop for anybody who's watching along. When you go into our let's see, when you go into our users and you do a new user, it only asks email, first name, last name. We don't prompt for a username, and then we stuff we use the email address as the username. It's a presumption that you're going to use email address as a username. So when we get to the login screen, instead of saying username, we say email, and but it is truly checking it against username, as it should. Okay, so our workflow, create user, worked with this one, with user registration. Anyone interested in doing the other one? See what it does?
Not necessarily. To me, it would
Okay.
be, I mean, I'm not, if anybody
Right.
else, certainly, go ahead. But
So just, so, you might be interested in doing a grant user role
Yeah.
if you wanted to let them be a citizen developer, for example, or just a regular user. They got users by default because, as we discovered in low-code Campfire several times ago, you can establish a default user role that gets assigned. And so that's why they got users. Let's see if my memory is correct on how to do that. Roles. So it's an automatically assigned there, right? That's why auto assignment. So that's why this user, when we created him, had the user's role automatically.
Yeah.
So you can either do it by default through roles, or in the workflow, you can grant them more. So if I'm correct, this this user management role now could be called for as many times as you had in a iteration of a spreadsheet, right? So if you had a form that you were importing, and do we want to keep going with that one? Calling the workflow, we can try it. So let's make a spreadsheet. We'll keep our confusion down here. This the same as this. Whoop. Wow. All right. We'll have at least 2 rows so that we can I love Excel. We can test that it's actually iterating. sense. So this would be a, we'll do it as a form. So let's see, sure. So we've got a page, we'll drop action form on it. So we'll have a user spreadsheet, and we're going to need the, what is it, relative, there it is, relative URL. We can use that. So we'll have a button. Oh, it's letting us do that automatically. That's nice. All the fields, first row is the column names. Oh, well, I think that it'll default okay. And
You don't have to put in the sheet name?
I don't know. I think it'll take the first sheet since there's only one.
Okay,
No, if you don't give a sheet name, it defaults to the very first sheet.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
That's what I thought, but that's a good one to know. There's also a query thing where you can check to see what the sheet names are if you need to know dynamically. All right, so then our next action is going to be to execute actions on an entity list. Our entity name is going to be users, and we're not going to save anything. The actions that we're going to do is execute create user. We've got our input fields here. So this is going to be users many times here. So hopefully I named them the same. So these are the names that come from the spreadsheet, right?
Mhm.
Username, password, and we're getting the values from the new user's entity, which is what we just imported, and we're not doing anything with the user ID and username. If we have problems, we'll come back and output those and put them to the log or something. But it's just going to iterate through all that stuff, and then I guess we can say message. If we were fancy, we would count how many we did and announce it, but we'll do this for 10 seconds in the middle. All right.
Look how we flustered Dale. He didn't rename his form. I think that's the first time in all his demos I haven't seen him do that.
Good catch. And it's this thing right here that makes me crazy. AVT action form, right? That you can't tell what you've got. So if you name them, you get that. But okay, you get a gold star. All right, so let's see what we got in users here. Test A and test B created. And
Dale, you're good under pressure.
oh, there's no pressure here. This is just, we're just playing, right? We're just talking. So they got the role. I guess if we were really serious, we would test that they could log in. So let's do that. So we got this and this. Whoops. Copy that.
Dale, you mentioned when you're going through that loop that we could do something fancy like count the number of users created.
Yep.
So would we have done that coming out of the workflow call and just,
Well, let's circle right back to that. So we have the username and password and login and bang, it's done. So that worked. So if we were to go into the action form again and look at the button, import button. Within this loop here, the action list is going to execute once per user. So if we did, if I were doing it, it would be something like this. We would add a context that says, call it user count, just that'll be the name of our thing here. So so we load the entities, we set the user count to 0, execute actions on entity list. So there's one change we're going to have to make here, and that is we really should say update all tokens in the original context. That says that any changes that we make to things like this that were outside of this execute actions will survive. The rules behind this one are a little bit complex, and I'm not sure I had to change that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, so now every time we create a user, and it really, again, if we wanted to be fancy, we would check to make sure that it actually worked, right? But so like that we got a user ID out of it, but we can add an action that is also a context, inject data, and so this one is a little bit harder than I would like it to be. I think if you really want to do this right, we need to use our DoMath action. Which I always have to look up the syntax for. So it would be something like DoMath expression 1 + 6 - 2 is 5, right? So that syntax works. And so we go back here and say the expression is going to be user count +1 that make sense why we had to do all that?
Yep.
So at the end here, we're going to have a user count. Count users were imported, and the mistake I made, since this was a continuous execution thing, really need an update form Ajax to prevent it from refreshing after that. So this toast will hang around on our screen. So we'll save, refresh the screen, and taking the easy way out here, I'm gonna just get rid of my users. So we no longer have them, test A and test B. So if we run this again, same sheet, run it. Just like magic.
If you don't mind me making one
Please.
little comment. That method, if like you said, if you were adding extra bells and whistles to actually check to see if the user was created,
Yep.
would be that method, because you would have the check, and then if the check passed, then you would increment. Otherwise, if you're just doing a straight count, you can actually use entity name : count. It's a given value. You don't have to go through the math.
That is yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So when we imported, let's see. So user spreadsheet, where is it? Oh,
It's in the
yeah.
button. So if you go into the import button, in your display toast, all you have to do is put the entity name.
Right. I was
and
looking for,
colon
yeah,
count.
there it is right here. It's saying
Okay.
that entity name count would be there. So we could have done that. So you're absolutely correct.
So that user count there is going to be number of rows in your spreadsheet, the number of times you went through the iteration.
Number of rows.
Is-
This is going to be number of rows in the spreadsheet.
Okay, so you could then, with an if statement on the other one, you hey, loaded 100 rows and 58 of them got processed through the loop, like testing
Right.
the result.
So this one isn't really accurate at this point, because we're just saying how many times did I iterate, and I iterated twice. The thing that you would want to do is how many got created, and so we would want to test to make sure it got created, and ideally that would be like in the in our workflow, we could say
You could capture the user ID coming back. And then,
well, yeah, but there's so we don't know. Let's take a look. If we go to our workflow and try and create one that exists, what happens? So that's this one. Whoops. We want to edit this, and in our spreadsheet here, here's one. So test A exists. If we were to try and do that again, if we were to run this and try and create that one again, the question is, what does it do? It gives an error. Our user already exists. So since so we could use that as a method, right? So we could say that is there an error. There isn't an on error handling in this one. So I think what we would have to do would be to look up the username beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to use a SQL action to check to see if that user exists.
Actually, let's do this. If we try it this way, log in if user exists, that'll probably keep it from erroring. So let's set it up again, right? Valid credential. So it didn't, because we don't have their password, but if we did, let's see. If they were setting up that's the bad method. The right method would be to look them up beforehand, or otherwise validate that that it succeeded, and then perhaps you could return a 1 or a 0 depending on whether you created it. In which case, in our loop here, we would instead of adding +1, we would add the return from that entity creation, and so if it wasn't created, it would be 0. If it was, it would be 1. It all depends on how you want to go. It probably would be ideal would be to capture errors, right? If there were, if any one of them turns out to be an error, then creating a list of those and outputting them so that the importer would know these are the rows that failed, that kind of thing, if you wanted to do something with them anyway.
So if you were to load your file again, would it stop the iteration loop when that first row, or would it continue on?
That is a great question, and let's add in a third row so to make sure that it actually succeeds. This will answer, does it stop or does it go, right? Because if that blows up, that would be something you'd need to know. So file should says 3 were imported, so it doesn't tell you about them. And if we go to users, we probably got logged in because I hit that checkbox. We ended up getting, it changed our context. That was unfortunate. So I'm going to have to log in now. See, it has me as test B. All right. First, I'm going to fix my workflow. So I don't get hit by that one again. And let's see what it did. It did create. So the error probably blows up that iteration. Let's see if we can actually see it in the logs. I would expect that every error would show up in the log. So,
well, in this case, there would have not been any errors because you had the login as existing user checked.
Well, but we already established either way, the workflow blew up.
No, it won't blow up because you supplied the credentials in the file.
Good credentials. You're right. You're right.
It blew up last time because you didn't have the credentials.
So let's see, what do we decide? The easy stuff we can do, the hard stuff you got to test and debug and iterate and look for the weird cases. But Matthew, do you think that answered your question about the original, what we started with 40 minutes ago?
That was a very thorough and complete, satisfactory answer. Thank you.
All All right. Well, it'll be on the recording, so you can follow along if you need anything. What else? What else we got?
I have a simple one for you guys.
Like
This is
simple.
Mark. This is Mark. Hey, yeah, I'd like to set up a simple workflow that'll just test to see if someone's logged in or not. You know, I think I could test if user ID is greater than 0. I think that should work. But where would I put that? Or something else.
Where would you user ID?
Yeah, I did. I tried it in an execute token action, and it didn't evaluate the expression of user ID greater than 0.
All right. So
You want to see it?
and you want it as a workflow?
Yeah, I was hoping to do it that way.
Well, good. I like it. So we'll select that, and so let's just so is this, how are you going to use it if it's a workflow?
Well, I'm going to call it from multiple other things, including forms and workflows. But yeah, I'm going to pass in the user ID, probably from an action form.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to do a little evaluation. Is it greater than 0? Unless there's a better way to do it.
Wouldn't it just be easier to just turn it into a token?
I think so.
It might.
Yeah, just have a token with the default value saying that if you don't supply the user ID, use the current user ID, otherwise use what you supply. And then if it's greater than -1 or whatever, then true, otherwise false.
Yeah, that sounds good. I was thinking workflow. So it should be greater than -1 because 0 is what, the default user?
Well, first, yeah, so let's make sure we know what we're doing here.
But usually whenever I call for user ID, what I usually do is say, user ID equals -1 and close that token. So if the person's not logged in, I always get a -1 as a result.
So we got to turn on replace tokens. I like to just understand exactly. So I am user ID 1 right now. If I go incognito, I am user ID equals blank. And host, so actually the easiest test would be blank, right? So let's go back here and
There isn't, silly question, but there isn't already a token for knowing if a user is logged in or not, is there? Seems like that would be something that Plant and App would have.
no, not that I'm aware of. So how do we want to write this? We could write it as a, see, I'm a SQL guy. I would do it in SQL, but
That's exactly how I would do it.
I would do it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
but since I'm Plant and App guy, let's do it as a workflow, just because I haven't used this workflow as token thing, so maybe I'll learn something. So configuration workflow. Do we want to we're just going to use user ID, right? There's no reason to pass in a user ID. So we're going to do a context.
Didn't we learn before that action form will pass it in by default, but otherwise the user ID is not already in a workflow? If you're not calling it from an action form? I thought that was the distinction we learned on Wednesday.
Well, it's whether or not they are logged in. User ID is part of what you get if they're logged in. So if this were coming from an API that was not logged in.
Okay.
Okay. So result is going to be false by default, and then we'll do another context item.
And now, depending how you're using it, Mark, there is a validator in a field, a custom validator that says username is available or username is available excluding current user. So I don't know if it will go out and see if the username is available. I don't know if that helps.
It is available as only having, yeah. So you're saying whether or not it can be, if they can sign up under that ID.
Right, yeah, so just depending on how he's using it, I don't know if that would help or not.
I like knowing that. Thank you.
Yep.
So if the user ID is not blank, then true. So I am logged in. We can't test the other case. So we have Campfire user is logged in as a workflow. So now if I were to go back and I was working on my token here. So we'll run a workflow. The workflow is going to be, it's probably not here on the list.
You know, for my purposes, I don't think you need to turn it into a token, do you? Like the workflow
Yeah.
is going to produce the answer.
I want to, I don't, for your purposes, no. For mine,
Okay. All right.
I do. So we're going
The benefit of
because I
turning
want to
it
be
into a
able to
token
just
is,
display it.
I was going to say the benefit of a token would be that you can use it in conditional statements.
Yep. Or just anywhere. Okay, let's try.
Which is, you know, pretty much what I want to do. So yeah.
We got user is logged in and output field is result, save and test. So we have this token now, but if we were to go back to our page, so it is logged in true, and then we go to our incognito false. So the answer then is this token, user is logged in, could be used anywhere.
Then you just created a token out of creating a workflow?
Right. I did a
So no matter what, you still needed to create a token in order for it to be used in such a manner. So would it have just been easier to do a SQL token directly?
Then. Yeah.
Well, there's, yes, probably, right? By doing it, you could have just simply created a token. For Mark's purpose, he wanted it as a workflow anyway. And then, you know, just in thinking of what's the next bigger box, if you wanted to keep up with what users were doing, you could expand, for example, the user is logged in workflow to write to a log, or you know, if you're charging them per hit, for example, you could
Yeah.
do that. So it just opens up the possibility that you could add more steps easily. If you're never going to go there, then simply defining it as a token.
Can I see that workflow again, Dale?
Sure. So we had no inputs. We have only the one output as result. The process is we're setting a context variable of result to false so that we have a hard value if of false, and then a conditional if the user ID user ID is not equal to blank, which we established blank is no user ID. Then we're setting result to true.
What action is that you're doing that in?
It's the inject context, inject data.
Okay, inject.
And I use that one all the time because it lets you do as many, you can set as many things in one step as you want.
Right.
There's another one called apply tokens is another one that you can use that I think it's only going to let you do, no, you can do many. And this one is recursive. So this is kind of fun if you have tokens within tokens within tokens and you want to expand them all, you can iterate through that. That's kind of fun. But either of these kind of do the same thing. It results in stuff going to the context.
Great.
When Mark posed the question there, I heard it a different way, which was, could you validate if another user was on the system? I understand there that you're getting the user ID from the current user, but could you have found out either through SQL or something else to if is Dale logged in today?
So I know that .NET Nuke has such a thing, but it's a if you did
Not reliable.
no, that was the question. So another
they had one. I think they removed it, the users online, because it was unreliable. Because I looked into this myself. I had a client that was asking the same thing. The only way, because it's a disconnected environment, the only thing you can really do is look at the last login date and make an assumption based off of how much time has elapsed. But there is no live thread that is going to literally tell you accurately if someone is online unless you incorporate some third-party application that keeps that live active thread with every person that's logged in.
which, by the way, Pusher will do, right? Pusher, when you disconnect from the page, it'll send a signal which you can trap. So go back to the Pusher video if you're as one possible solution. But yeah, other than that, you could make your own assumptions, and then yes, you could build it into this. For example, if every time you did this, you could search for the last login date. You probably have to start doing something with IP addresses or device fingerprint or something to catch that you're logged in on the same user ID logged in on two different sources.
The only other option that I was looking into this, if you want it to be a little bit more accurate, but still stay within this disconnected type of environment, if you add a form or a token on every single page, and that token stamps the user ID and the date time into a table, you can always then check the table for that user ID, see the last time that page was loaded. So every single time a page loads, it's restamping the date and time. So it's not the last login, but the last activity. And that gives you a little bit more, accuracy with regards to if someone is logged in.
So the user is probably logged in.
you're a little bit closer. And the question is, what are you trying to capture? Though the scenario that you just talked about, Ben, is a really good one for is Dale logged in, but then there's the is Dale logged in on another device. and active on another device. So then you'd have to expand your stamp to include some other characteristic like IP address. So, you're in the area of build your own. It's an interesting concept, though. All right. Well, it turned out to open line turned out to be better than I thought. Right. We're going to get together again next week. Still, you guys doing something fun for anybody in the States doing Labor Day?
We're
Probably
programmers. We
working.
don't have fun.
Do what?
Go ahead, Matthew.
I said I'm probably working.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I said.
I am actually taking the day off. I'm going to be broadcasting all week next week from the coast of Texas, the Galveston area. Got a beach house we've rented, so we'll see how well the internet runs down there. So it's
Sounds
a working vacation, but I'll be down there. Maybe I'll put up some
You're gonna
pictures.
have to change your backdrop just so we know you're on the beach.
That's right. I will get a beach picture. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for showing up. This has been fun, and I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dale.
You
Good to
bet.
see you guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.